Hello, everyone. Welcome today. My name is Brittany Grimes, and I am a permit manager for industrial permitting for the City of Portland. And today I'm going to discuss the inception and initial compliance of the city's craft fermented beverage program. This program would not have been possible without the great collaboration that went into its entirety, from the initial research to the outreach of the various stakeholders, the time that went into the initial inspections, and even the continuation of the program. The city of Portland is home to over 650,000 people living in over 90 different neighborhoods. The city has grown about 12% since 2010, with the median age being 37.1 years of age, with approximately 530,000 adults still living within the city. Currently, there are over 60 breweries that serve the city. The Columbia Boulevard wastewater treatment plant has been in operation since 1952. Prior to the plant becoming operational, the city's industrial discharges, agricultural wastes, and sewage emptied straight into the Willamette River and into the Columbia Slough. Pump stations, sanitary, storm, and combined sewer pipes all convey wastewater to the plant. And once arriving at the plant, the wastewater is treated in a two-phase treatment process. The primary phase screens out large debris for landfilling, skims grease, oil, and floatable solids, and collects and thickens the settable solids. There is approximately 16 tons of material removed at the headworks each day. In the secondary treatment process, the wastewater flows through aeration tanks, and naturally occurring microorganisms feed on organic pollutants in the wastewater. The waste stream then heads to the secondary clarifiers. These tanks have sweep mechanisms on the surface of the water and then at the base of the tanks. And the sweep mechanisms take return activated sludge and pump it back into the 4 aeration tanks for further processing. The skimmings from the surface go back into the headworks for reprocessing, and then the treated wastewater, after disinfection at the dechlorination facility, flows to the Columbia River. The biosolids, so the treatment of biosolids that are removed during the primary and secondary phase produce biosolids for the city, and then the city uses those biosolids as a soil supplement on dry pasture lands. The Federal Clean Water Act requires cities to regulate industries that discharge wastewater or stormwater to the city systems. As the city sewer and stormwater services provider, Environmental Services sets pollutant limits and regulates industries in order to protect the city systems and our watershed and worker health. The city allows industries to discharge wastewater to the city system through a few different mechanisms. The types of permits that are in industrial permitting for the city of Portland are significant industrial user wastewater permits, non-significant industrial user wastewater permits, non-discharging, zero discharging, alternative discharge control mechanisms. The industrial permitting also has a batch discharge program and a sub-meter program. Industrial permitting issues batch discharge authorizations to businesses and projects that are required to discharge wastewater to the sanitary or combined sewer systems. Any requested discharges to the storm system are forwarded to appropriate agencies. The discharges are typically of limited duration and are related to a specific site and/or operation project. Some examples of batch authorizations include dewatering during construction activities, gray water from events, chlorinated water from hydrostatic tests and/or pools, and power washing with specific cleaners. Industrial customers who discharge a volume of water to the sewer system that is significantly more or less than the incoming water are part of the sub-meter program. To participate in the sub-meter program, a business pays program and administrative costs. per meter and per bill. The yearly administrative costs depend on how many submeters the businesses have installed and how frequently the business is billed for sewer, stormwater, and water services. So that could be monthly or quarterly. Currently, the fees for the 2021 fiscal year are about $100 per meter per bill. And then those rates get changed in July at the start of the fiscal year. Um, so the City of Portland's alternative discharge control mechanism, we have multiple types of other ADCMs as well. We permit mobile washers, transformer spills, electrical equipment spills, asbestos abatement, dental amalgam, biocremation, and utility vault dewatering. Um, the alternative discharge control mechanism is authorized in Portland City Code 1734, and it establishes best management practice requirements for each business sector. So for each business sector, they have similar processes, similar pollutants or pollutants of concern, and similar treatments. Um, so the loadings from the individual facilities are pretty insignificant, but when you add all the loadings from the facility, so from all the facilities together, it could be pretty impactful to the system. Um, the industries that are controlled under ADCMs are usually of lower risk. The ADCMs themselves, they do not have any expiration date as long as the on-site processes stay the same. And there is an annual certification that gets submitted each year certifying that the BMPs for the previous year were followed. They do have to keep some record keeping, and they are also non-transferable. So if a business comes and buys out an industry, they would have to reapply to be in the alternative discharge control mechanism program. In 2016, the city um, created the monitoring access structure City of Portland administrative rule. It's ENB 4.35. And the intent is to ensure that any users who are required to construct a monitoring access structure does so in a manner that guarantees access by city personnel for the safe and discrete collection of representative samples. This rule applies to new and existing users that introduce or are expected to introduce upon commencement of operations pollutants into the public sewer from any non-domestic source. The purpose of this rule is to define the structural, functional, operational, and location requirements for the monitoring access structures. So for triggers for the types of requirements would be new or any existing or new facility that discharges or is expected to discharge industrial or other non-domestic wastes to the public sewer. Um, for businesses or industries or facilities that the city can show through documented historical data or information that have problems such as line blockages, backups, overflows, corrosion, high fats, oils, and greases or solids. For facilities, new or existing, that have a new NPDES or stormwater permit. A new or existing facility that is now required to have a industrial wastewater discharge permit. And for new or existing facilities that are increasing their discharge to 10,000 gallons or more per day. And this is so that the industries can be sampled. So businesses and industries that use the fermentation and distillation processes to produce beverages are subject to environmental regulatory requirements for the city. The types of craft fermented beverage production found within the city currently are breweries, distilleries, cideries, wineries, kombucheries, drinking vinegar production facilities, and also water kefir production facilities. In 2015, the City of Portland Field Ops team was conducting BOD and TSS monitoring for extra strength billing per Portland City Code 1736. Field Ops had also decided to sample for pH, and they found that pH exceedances were common in areas around facilities that had distillation or fermentation processes on site. There had also been multiple issues with pump stations near these facilities. The pump stations were clogging due to fermentation bisolids, and so it was creating a bit of a mess. So, the industrial permitting team at the time then researched other municipalities that had regulated these types of industries and facilities, and had researched the brewing associations of various established on-site best management practices. And the pollutants of concern for these types of facilities were found to be pH. So these facilities have both really low and really high pH substances on site. The actual finished product The finished product themselves, so kombucha ranges from 2.5 to 3.5 SU, wine in the 3 SU range, cider is in the 3 range, beer is in the 4, and then for spirits, it varies. So the finished product themselves is very low pH and is a prohibited discharge per 1734 and 4.03. They also have many sanitizing chemicals on site with relatively low pHs, and then also high pH substances on site, such as cleaners and detergents, bleach. And then another pollutant of concern was found to be solids. So there's a lot of spent grain and yeast that is a byproduct of this process. And so these facilities, need to find a way to mitigate the solids. And then also BOD, so sugars, alcohols, and vinegars as well. Once the city of Portland had identified the pH issues, and then also the pump station issues, um, and had researched the various BMPs, a draft of the ADCM was sent to the Oregon's Brewer Guild and the Oregon Distillers Guild for review. That took place in June of 2016, and it was just a way to start to get their feedback. Um, once the draft ADCM had been sent out and there had been some feedback, the industrial permitting created a fact sheet, and this fact sheet was distributed to various craft fermented groups, and this took place in November of 2017. The groups that it was distributed to were the Kombucha Brewers International, American Craft Spirits Association, the United States Association of Cider Makers, Oregon Distillers Guild, Oregon Brewers Guild, and also the Brewers Association. Once the fact sheet was handed out and there had been some time for review, the industrial permitting group took part in various Q&As at different Brewers Guild meetings around the city prior to the rollout of the program, just to be able to get feedback, learn about some of their concerns or worries with the program, and then also talk about ways in which these facilities could implement the BMPs. So there were various concerns from the stakeholders. The final comments from the stakeholders were received around May of 2018. And so some of the concerns were, if we fill out the application for the ADCM, depending on the answers, could this trigger a flow-blown industrial wastewater permit? And so that's something that they were worried about. Obviously the answer is yes. And so, um, and so, uh, the industrial permitting team went over, the differences between what triggered an ADCM and then what triggered a industrial wastewater permit. So they also asked about what parameters and thresholds that were used to determine which permit was appropriate for each facility. And so that the answer to that would have been, the amount of wastewater that is being discharged per day, and then the potential to impact what the potential of that wastewater is to impact the POTW. Another question, since the ADCMs do not have a expiration date and then are just recertified annually, they had asked about facilities who only produce seasonally, and so still seasonal producers will need a full the alternative discharge control mechanism. They asked about renewal applications, so they were pretty worried about having the requirements of the ADCM be similar to the industrial wastewater permit. And for some of these facilities, it's just a single home brewer. And so, the requirements of the industrial wastewater permit would be a lot for a single home brewer to handle and to manage. They asked about the costs, and so currently we have not implemented alternative discharge control mechanism fee as of yet. That is the plan, though, to do so, to administer the program. They had also asked about being in the sub-meter program, and so the amount of water being either not discharged or discharged makes a difference if you're gonna want to be in the sub-meter program or not. The costs need to equal out, and so you would need to discharge a certain amount of water for the program to be beneficial for you. They also asked about containment, and the EPA guidelines states that secondary containment capacity is not less than 10% of the total volume, or provide a capacity of 110% of the largest single tanker container. And so once the stakeholder outreach had been sort of wrapped up, the Craft Fermented Beverage website was updated June 2018 in preparation for the rollout of the program. So this is what the fact sheet looks like. It's a pamphlet. The fact sheet has basic information regarding the industrial permitting program, such as what permits are available, how to contact the group, or how to contact spill response in case of a spill. It also provides information on monitoring access structures, grease removal devices, secondary containment, extra strength sewer charges, solid waste and recycling requirements, and also the sub-meter program. The fact sheet also contains the pollutants of concern and has various mitigation strategies within the fact sheet. And so the mitigation strategies for the various, or the 3 pollutants of concern. So for pH, one of the mitigation strategies is to use a tank or a similar vessel to capture both acidic and alkaline waste streams, and then to mix those waste streams. Once waste streams are well mixed, to test the resulting pH with a handheld meter. If in range, that wastewater can be discharged. If the pH is outside of the allowable range, then add an alkaline chemical to increase the pH, or acidic chemical to reduce the pH to reach the allowable range, and also to mix the wastewater well before testing the pH. Another, it's not necessarily a mitigation strategy, but is to keep a log of documenting each batch of the wastewater that is discharged to the city. So for solids, there are multiple different mitigation strategies for the solids. There's agricultural, baking, composting, and then also supplemental energy. So for agricultural, the spent grains and yeast can be used by local farmers and livestock owners for on-site composting and feed uses. Within the city of Portland, there has been the spent grains have been used by local baking businesses for bread, cookies, and dog biscuits. Composting, so composting the spent grains and yeast can be used to fertilize the fields, community gardens, and urban greenhouses. And then supplemental energy, fuel to energy processes converts the spent grain into biogas that then can be used to generate energy. This is done like in Tillamook. And then for BOD, the Columbia wastewater treatment plant is designed to remove the pollutants. However, the BOD from craft fermented beverage facilities is much higher than typical wastewater and costs more to treat. Therefore, the businesses creating craft fermented beverages pay an extra strength charge to cover the increased treatment costs through the extra strength program. Okay, so the required best management practices of the ADCM is to establish and implement procedures for neutralizing processed wastewater when it is outside of the acceptable pH range of 5.0 to 11.5 standard units. And so the facility just needs to create an SOP um, for neutralizing the processed wastewater. They need to monitor the pH of the processed wastewater discharges to the sewer to ensure compliance. So each discharge needs to be tested for pH prior to discharge. Then they need to maintain a pH log detailing the method of analysis, the date of the pH reading, results of the analysis, and the volume of water that was discharged. Each facility has to install and maintain screens with openings no greater than a 1/4 inch on all floor drains and sinks, and then store all materials in secondary containment. The alternative discharge control mechanism also contains a section of recommended BMPs. These are not required, however, they are included so hopefully the facilities follow these BMPs as well. So these BMPs, the recommended BMPs given to facilities are to allow headspace in brew tanks to prevent overflowing, create a spill plan to prevent slug load discharges of concentrated wastewater, and then train all employees on response and notification requirements. So that would be if there was a spill, to call the spill response, City of Portland spill response. To maintain and clean solid separators or screen devices on schedule routines to avoid backups. So this would be like, for the 1/4 inch drain screens, that they would need to maintain those and make sure that those aren't backing up. To the extent practical, remove fine solids from wastewater to reduce the suspended solids load in the wastewater. Deactivate spent yeast or trub and dispose of solid waste or mix with spent grains for animal feed. Dispose of spent grains and organic solids, so that could be the mash, as solid waste or as animal feed. Sweep or squeegee the floor prior to washdown to reduce suspended solids, the suspended solid load in the wastewater, and then to wash all equipment indoors or on covered wash pads with drains protected by screens or other solids removal devices. Okay, so for the rollout, it actually didn't take very long. The hardest part was mostly the administration aspect. So, printing and sending out the craft fermented beverage packet to the list of facilities. That probably took the most time. but the packet was sent out to 111 facilities in 2018. On the cover letter, we gave the facilities 90 days to resubmit. Um, it got it got close. I think that there there might have been some worry about filling out the initial application, or even, thinking if it was a requirement or not. And so we ended up giving all facilities a 1 month extension. The head of the Brewers Guild asked the program if we could make it for all um, facilities within the city, and we said yes. And we posted a notice on the website. We also included the packet on the website to make it easier for facilities to submit the application. And then once we started getting back those applications, we issued the ADCM to the business, and then we set the effective date. So once we received the application, we would immediately send back the ADCM with an effective date that was six weeks from the date of the receipt. And the purpose of that was just to allow for the facilities to get that ADCM, read the best management practices, and then figure out a way to implement those in their facilities. So for initial compliance, like I said, there was 111 packets or applications sent. Out of those 111 businesses, 83 were eligible businesses for the ADCM program. 46 of those applications were received without any enforcement, so that was good. However, there had to be 31 warning notices sent out to businesses that did not return the application by the extension date. And so the initial compliance rate was 55%. But after that first warning notice being sent out, we achieved an 89% compliance rate. There was only 9 notice of violations sent out, so that's an escalation from the warning notice. And then 28 of the 111 businesses had closed, moved out of the city, or did not produce beverage on site, was just ended up being like a tasting room. So this is the initial inspection form that we used to do the first round of inspections for the facilities. The initial round of inspections were used as a chance to personally meet at the site and go through the requirements and discuss how the facility implemented the BMPs, or if they were struggling to implement those required BMPs, how they could use what was already on site, or come up with a way that allowed them to implement them with minimal disruption to any on-site processes or remodeling. The BMPs were purposely written pretty vague because the types of facilities that craft fermented beverage businesses are operating in could be a side off of somebody's restaurant or a home brew operation. And so we knew that these BMPs were going to look different all around. The inspection form was created this way just for quick reference and then data collection. We found this just to be the easiest way to collect the information on the various BMPs and then be able to compare that information between facilities or industries. So the inspection SOPs were created sort of from how we do our inspections in industrial permitting. And so the first thing that we did was we sent an email to the facility requesting an inspection. and would would give a few time slots for them to choose from. If the facility did not respond, then we would send a follow-up email asking them again to please respond. And then if no response was given, then that would just trigger an unannounced inspection where we would just show up. So once we went out on the inspection, we had a copy of the ADCM, the inspection sheet, and then also we have pH log examples. I'll show you in a minute. We went over each of the required BMPs and how it's implemented within the facility. We asked about the recommended BMPs and if or how they implemented those within the facility. Went over any questions that the ADCM holder had. Um, and then that was the initial round of the inspections. If a required BMP was not being implemented, we gave a set amount of time to implement that BMP and then would go and reinspect approximately 2 weeks later. If multiple BMPs were not being followed or implemented or purposely not being followed or implemented, that would result in an enforcement action for the facility. Once the inspection form is completed, we would attach any photos taken to a photo log and save that in an IU folder, and then send a follow-up inspection letter stating that from what we saw, the BMPs were being followed for the year. So here are some examples of the BMP pH logs that we provided. These are not the required logs that they need to provide. This was just an example that we provided that they could keep and use. So this was the there were multiple ideas or sorry, one moment, my little puppy is coming into the room. Okay. So facilities, like I said, they can be in corners of somebody else's facility or in a huge warehouse or in a garage. And so these are some of the different types of containment vessels that some different facilities had. So the first one is an IBC tote used for wastewater. The second is just a trash can that states this is not a trash can and it's for pH adjustment. And then the third is for brewing. So for the 1/4-inch drain screens, these are some of the ways that facilities decided to implement that BMP. As you can see, all three of these are just something that they had made, which I think are all very good ideas. For secondary containment, as you can see on the left, they used a containment pallet, and on the right, they constructed a berm to block off part of a closet to make that a secondary containment spot. So for the initial round of inspections, as you can see, most of them were breweries. 71% of them were breweries or brew pubs, 9% distilleries, 2% cideries, 8% wineries, and 8% kombucheries, and then 1% each for water kefir and drinking vinegar. So after the initial compliance inspection round, let me go back really quick. There was 84 inspections completed. So quite a few inspections completed, and those were mostly done by Jess Alosio. Her information will be at the end of the presentation. So the success of this program can be attributed to the work done between the city and the Brewers and Distillers Guild, as well as the outreach material. There definitely were a lot of lessons learned and a lot of oh, that would have been cool to have done. But yeah, it was a great program and it was exciting to implement. So the collaborative work, not only between um, industrial permitting and the various stakeholders, but also within the city. So field ops, extra strength program, and industrial permitting all had a great hand in creating this program. And then, one thing I think was super phenomenal about this program was the enhanced transparency between, a government entity and then the regulated community. With the industrial permitting team working with stakeholders and the people who would be being permitted from the very beginning, it just showed that there was collaboration and that the city found it important to get that feedback prior to rolling out a program. Um, I like I liked being able to hear various stakeholder outreach, all throughout the program. Usually it needs to be done in like a public comment period, or something of that sort. But just being able to reach out directly and just have an open conversation was very helpful. Um, uh, also I think that another positive of the program was giving the amount of time from when the stakeholder or from when the facility received the ADCM to when the effective date would be. Giving them that time, it just allowed for them to get used to get comfortable with the information, read it, and know kind of what was expected of them, and then have time to either implement those BMPs, ask questions, etc. Another thing was, specifically writing those BMPs pretty vaguely so that, the facility could implement them in a way that made sense to them. All of the facilities look so much different. The size of the facility, the amount of space, just range it. It was super super various. And so, you know, with the vague BMPs, I think that it made the IUs feel more comfortable, knowing that they could implement those in a way that made sense to them. Um, one really difficult aspect about actually inspecting these facilities is the time frame. So we're in the office until 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and then that's when these facilities start opening. And so a lot of these inspections had to be done on Fridays, and in the afternoons, to accommodate for when they opened. Some of the facilities only operated on weekends, and only did, some sort of cleaning during the day, one day a week during the weekend. So that we had to schedule the inspections for that time. So that was pretty difficult in that aspect, is being able to actually go and inspect with a time frame and schedule that worked for everybody. Um, Another thing that's I think could have been difficult but made easier by the various magazines and newspapers within the city of Portland is, finding these facilities in the first place. Um, Craft fermented beverage programs so far have seemed to kind of go come up pretty quickly and then also go away pretty quickly. And so the turnover within the industry is pretty high. And so being able to keep up, knowing which which facilities are in operation, uh, could be difficult, I think. But I think that um, we had it a little bit easier within the city of Portland due to having so many independent uh, magazines and uh, magazines and newspapers that highlighted these facilities. Um, Also, the breweries, the residential breweries, they can be microbreweries, nano breweries, or even pico breweries. So super, super small breweries, that are maybe just doing some are, some research and development, but they're still discharging that wastewater to the city. So um having those facilities can be pretty difficult to manage as well. And then also communication. So with the, facilities, only being open 4 or 5 p.m. later, and then some of them only being open on the weekends, it can make for communication between um, a facility and the city pretty difficult. Um, and so a lot of email back and forth, and then time, multiple days between emails sometimes. So there was it was a really exciting program to roll out. Um, it would have been it would have been nice if we had had some sort of, software that could have done all the administrative stuff, such as mailing out or sending out the initial round of packets. But other than that, it was super great. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to email me. My email can be found on this slide. It's brittany.grimes@portlandoregon.gov. Another major contributor to this presentation was Jessa Locio, um, and her information can be found here. That's also the email address is a typo. It should be jessica.alocio@portlandoregon.gov. And so if you cannot reach her, send me an email, and I'll get you in touch with her if you have any questions for her. But yeah, everything can be found on our Craft Fermented Beverage website. So go head over there, take a look, and thank you for your time. I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you very much.